You're listening to X-Posure on Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, and that is The Vaccines with Sometimes I Swear. It's the opening track to the brand new album, Pick Up Full of Pink Carnations, and I'm going to play the whole thing with a little help from Justin from The Vaccines, who sat with me in the studio. Hello, Justin.
Hey, John. How you doing?
It's good to see you. Thanks so much for coming in. Really exciting to have a new album by The Vaccines, number 6 already, which seems amazing because they just keep coming out. What did you want to do this time round?
It's crazy. I mean, it still sounds crazy to me to hear the number 6 when talking about Vaccines records. But I mean, I guess every time you make a record, hopefully it's got sort of part of this like process of refinement. I think like if you're still hungry and inquisitive and interested and all that sort of stuff, and you want to keep making records, then I think the aim is always to make one slightly like better than the last one, I think, and maybe more concise in its message and in its themes and its sonic, capacity and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the last album, Back in Love City, I mean, in a way, that had a bit of a concept to it. There was a theme running through the whole
loosely
record.
Conceptual.
Yes.
Or maybe not loosely conceptual, maybe, tightly conceptual. I don't know.
Is this one different? Or was that an exploration?
I mean, there is a theme running through the record. I think like one of loss, but then importantly one of discovery as well. That often comes from that loss and growth and all that sort of stuff. I think, but maybe less intentionally and more just sort of circumstantially because of what we were going through in life, or I was going through in life when writing it.
Yeah. And do these songs, do they just pop up in your head as you're walking down the road? Or now that it's a job, now that it's 6 albums in, do you have to, sit at your desk and think, right, it's time for a new record, I'm going to write some songs? Yeah,
I mean, sometimes they pop in your head, and other times I think you do have to sit down. I mean, I'll often feel guilty about going to see like a movie in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday, but pretty much every time I do, something will pop in my head when I'm walking there, or if someone says something, or is if there's a particularly like inspiring scene, or a kind of visually interesting or pretty scene or whatever, and so I think that often by living life as much as by working, you're kind of rewarded with these little like sparks, I guess, of inspiration.
Yeah. So that kind of dissolute musician lifestyle that allows you to go to the pictures in the afternoon can be very inspiring and creative, which is good.
Yeah, I think it can.
Excellent. So with Sometimes I Swear, the opening track, where did this come in?
This came, as many songs do, sat on my sofa in London. I think it was the only song written in London on the record, but I wrote it with Tim from The Vaccines, who's now playing lead guitar in the band. As I have many songs, like we sit on that sofa and write many songs together. And I think there probably aren't many places in the world that I feel as kind of at peace, and at home as I do sat on that sofa. It's the first kind of like home I think I've ever built myself. But even there, I still question my place in the world. There's this ever-present sort of existential crisis, like whirring away. And I think recently I've been questioning whether or not this wanderlust I have is because I'm running to something or from something, and never really feeling fully comfortable or at peace with myself wherever I am. And so I guess that song is sort of exploring that, really.
Right. And when this song arrives with you and Tim on the couch,
yes,
is it the music that leads, or have you got a phrase that is going around your head?
You know what? It's so often. Well, I think it's always different, I should say. There are sometimes I'll like turn up with almost like a poem, like a fully formed kind of like lyrical idea, and we'll try and match music to that. And then there are other times where we get some music going that's really exciting, and then I have to play catch up with the lyrics. And then other times there's this great kind of symbiosis where they both happen at the same time. I do remember, is often the case, once we had the chorus chords just like blurting out this phrase, like and then you sort of have to like figure out what it means, and you're not quite sure where it comes from. And so I think that definitely happened on this song, and then obviously like can start breathing life into it and meaning into it when you sort of write around it. But it obviously comes from somewhere. It's obviously like it's a feeling from somewhere. It's not just it's not a meaningless phrase. There's a reason you land on that, I guess.
Yeah, and would that phrase been of Sometimes I Swear?
Yeah, sometimes I swear it feels like I don't belong anywhere. Yeah, I definitely didn't have it going into the writing. So yeah, that's what I think I must have just shouted that as we start playing the chords. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is just the two of you with guitars just kind of looking at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not true actually. And a laptop and
yeah.
a QWERTY keyboard. But essentially, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And how long has Tim been in the band now?
Tim he started playing live with us in 2015, and then he joined officially in 2018 when we made Combat Sports, which is our fourth record. And then when Freddie left last year, I guess, he kind of took 3 or 4 steps forward and is now playing lead guitar. So actually, in some capacity or other, he's been in the band for like 9 years.
Yeah, for quite a long time.
Yeah,
But suddenly he's got this extra responsibility because
he has, yes.
Freddie kind of left and now it's like, oh, well, you get on with that.
Yeah.
No, that's no.
Well, I think, actually, I feel sort of, for him at least, he's such an amazing musician and so creative. And he didn't really even play guitar when he joined the Vaccines. He's like a keyboard player, and he sort of taught himself, actually often just by sitting with Freddie and playing for like hours and hours every day, taught himself guitar. And he just has a very different melodic sensibility to Freddie as well. And so actually I quite like the idea that with this new era comes like a new sensibility, and you're not trying to kind of, like fill a Freddie-shaped hole or anything. You're like allowing someone to kind of step up and, fill the space in the ways they're inspired to do so, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it still sounds like the Vaccines.
Yes.
But for me, listening to the album as a whole, it's drums and vocals seem to be the most driving, important things in it.
Well, again, I think there's something to be said for that, because on the last record, all of the drums were sort of programmed and sequenced and all that kind of stuff, and we were, I think, exploring, making music in the box. And Johan is an incredible drummer, and he's a human, and I think that with the new lineup as well, I think we wanted to almost like re-establish our humanity, if that makes sense, and maybe have something a little bit rough around the edges, and something where you can feel that you can kind of, you get a sense of what kind of drummer Johan is on this record, and actually I think you can get a sense of what kind of guitarist Tim is, and what kind of writer and singer I am, and obviously Arnie on bass. And so I think having a bit more humanity at the forefront of the record was a conscious decision, I think.
Yeah. Well, it worked. It sounds really great, and it's really driving. Heartbreak Kid is the next song. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, I think, well, I wrote this in LA, and I wrote it at Andrew Wells' studio, which is where we ended up making the record. It's a beautiful studio in the Hollywood Hills with this kind of big floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the hills, and the light kind of pours in, so it's like a very fun, inspiring place to make music every day. And I guess it's I've always thought of there kind of being two types of people in the world, really. The people who have had their heart broken and people who haven't had their hearts broken yet. I think that's like most people go through it at some point and are sort of forced to confront that pain and step into that pain, and it's a scary thing to step into, but having experienced pain in lots of different ways, as we all have, and then also having gone through periods of my life where I don't really feel much about much at all, I think I'd always take feeling something over feeling nothing. And so I think this song is a bit of a sort of call to arms, really, in that respect. A reminder that, even sort of pain and change and loss and fear are, maybe better to kind of be embracing than be numbness or the empty void. I don't know. Yeah.
So open up.
Yes, exactly. Open up. Yeah.
And are you the Heartbreak Kid then, or are you?
Well, at some point I have been. Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Well, we're going to hear all about it now. This is the Vaccines with Heartbreak Kid on X-Posure Radio X. It is the Vaccines with Lunar Eclipse on X-Posure Radio X. It's from the new album Pick Up Full of Pink Carnations, which has just come out. Justin from the Vaccines is here. I'm John Kennedy. Justin is talking us through it track by track. Lunar Eclipse. Was it a lunar eclipse when you suddenly had this idea?
It was indeed. Actually, I was on a road trip to the Joshua Tree Desert, and about 5 minutes after the album artwork was taken, we're just like driving in this hire car, like pulled over and watched this lunar eclipse. I mean, the moon was like bigger than I'd ever seen it before, and I'm not really I'm not particularly witchy myself. I'm not really like into astrology or anything, but it was pretty crazy being in the desert and being in that sort of environment and seeing the moon this big. And I think my feelings were already quite heightened at the time anyway. And got back the next day and then wrote Lunar Eclipse. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, I mean, you don't necessarily need to believe in stargazing to be in awe of a
This is true.
phenomenon.
This is true. And it was pretty powerful, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing setting as well
Yes.
in the Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so then was it just the phrase that stuck in your head and you wrote something else? Or
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that some songs on the record and some songs I've written throughout our career are like very literal, almost like chronological, I guess, accounts of like events or something, and then others are kind of like cherry picked, to kind of all sit within this sort of like central, I guess, like nervous system of like, in this case, the lunar eclipse, and so it's not necessarily about that weekend or about the lunar eclipse, but it's just kind of a collection of thoughts and feelings that sort of I'd had, in notebooks and iPhone notes and that sort of thing that kind of started to like make sense together, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
yeah.
But obviously, sometimes, I mean, songs are kind of like magpie creations, aren't they? You
Yes.
pick up a little bit of both personal experience, other people's experience, a fleeting thing that you can see through the car window, maybe.
And I think for me, more and more, they've become those kind of things. I think when I first wrote songs, if someone upset me or hurt me or I'd done the same to someone else, I would sit down and document it in like a very literal sense. Whereas now, if I experience those emotions, I might write like a phrase the next day or something, not necessarily. And then when you come to the moment when you're writing a song and you're trying to capture that feeling, you kind of look through everything you've got and you're like, oh, that makes sense with that, and that makes sense with that, and that makes sense with that, and then you start piecing it all together, and you realize that even though one word might have preceded another word by 2 years, they kind of come together in this like in perfect harmony sometimes, which is always like a good feeling, I think.
Yeah. So you wrote this after witnessing the lunar eclipse.
Yes, the next morning.
But
yeah.
you co-wrote it with Andrew Wells.
Yes.
So this is back in LA in the
This is back
studio.
in LA.
You're
yeah.
in the midst of recording the record.
We'd done half of it. Yeah, we'd done half of it. Yeah.
And you just had this idea, and he was there to help you.
Yeah, and the great thing about Andrew actually is that he's very sort of I don't know what he's this kind of, I suppose one of his, I think, greatest qualities as a producer. He's quite holistic, but he's a kind of facilitator, really. I think he'll kind of draw things out of you that you knew were in there but didn't necessarily know how to get out in that moment. Like he'll, every time we sat down and he sort of helped me write a song, I get to the end of the day and think like, oh, thank God he was in the room, because I'll do something and straight away he'll make me feel great about having done it, and that's like an inspiring thing, because again, like 13 years into Vaccines, then I guess like now like 20 years into like writing songs myself, you're always like looking for new ways and methods and environments and people to kind of trick yourself into feeling like you're doing it for the first time again, and that sort of thing. And you're not always looking for people to like push you in new directions. You're just looking for people to like open you up. And he's like great at that, I think.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah. Discount Dekooning is the next song with in brackets last one standing.
Yes.
What's going on here?
I'm now slightly concerned that I've pronounced his name wrong in the song.
Right.
Because I've said discount dekooning, but I'm worried it might be discount deconing.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that I double checked on Wikipedia. Sometimes if there's like a foreign pronunciation, you can do and it'll say like discount deconing or whatever when you like click on it. And I'm sure it said discount dekooning, but I've since heard a couple of people say it. Dutch people say discount deconing, so I'm slightly nervous now. I've got his name wrong, but
it's tricky. I mean, people say Van Gogh.
Exactly. There you go.
Gogh,
That's exactly. There you go. There you go.
Different parts of the world probably say it different ways.
But I read that a deconing or a dekooning at one time was sort of the most expensive painting to ever sell at auction, and I started thinking about value of things, perceived value of things, and then your own sort of perceived value of self-worth and all that kind of thing. And so just exploring really, I guess feelings of self-worth, and then how that may sometimes be inflated by somebody else. I think there's like maybe a mildly like apocalyptic undertone to the lyrics as well. I don't know.
When I was listening to this, I'm thinking it's being played in a festival set and people start chanting the Keep On Dancing on and on thing.
It's interesting when you sort of like separate yourself from like, you know, an embryonic idea, because you go in a direction that you might not necessarily have gone in if you were like, oh God, no, you know, this is for the vaccines. And so I quite like when you start from from maybe like a different viewpoint or something. And yeah, does that make sense? I'm just rambling.
No, it makes complete sense. But I think that there could also be a dance remix of this created that would use that phrase.
Well, if anyone's listening.
And it would slay dance floors around the world. But then the great thing is that it has this other lyric, which is more explorative and asks some big questions.
Well, you know, I think using the phrase dancing is a bit like using the word love in a song. I mean, they're probably the two most used or overused words, depending on how you want to look at it. I mean, we certainly say love a lot in songs. I don't know if we've ever said dancing before, but I suppose then the kind of trick or the fun part is like trying to like repackage it in a way that feels fresh and that, you know, doesn't necessarily just sound like something you've heard a million times before. So the idea that actually you might just be dancing as the world is ending, which, come to think of it, has probably also been done before. But I don't know. I think there's a fresh spin on it. I like to think.
But then you give it a title like Discount Dekooning or Dekooning, Last Man Standing, which doesn't give any clue as to what's going to happen.
No, exactly. No. That was I was like, we can't have dancing in the title.
Yeah, but there's definitely going to be dancing right now when people hear this. So. I think so. This is The Vaccines with Discount Dekooning, Last One Standing on X-Posure, Radio X. You're listening to X-Posure on Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, and tonight I'm playing the whole of The Vaccines' new album, Pick Up Full of Pink Carnations is what it's called. That track you just heard was called Primitive Man. Justin is here with me. Sorry, I've stumbled over the title a few times when I've been trying to say it on the radio. It's a bit of a tongue twister.
It's a tongue twister, yeah. You've said it right, though, and that's more than some people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How can you say it wrong?
I think a few people have left out a few words here.
Oh, right. That's haste.
Exactly.
That's
Take your time.
It's a tricky business.
Yeah.
We might talk about that a bit more when we get to the song that includes that line, I think. Primitive Man, though. Who is Primitive Man? Such a great title.
Thank you. Well, I suppose we all are. I suppose. Yeah. I mean, certainly I am. And I think it is quite like a primitive, primal sounding song. Like going back to that previous point about, you know, wanting a bit more humanity across the record. It's definitely like quite, I almost want to say quite naked in its sound. Like I think there are some songs that really benefit from sort of depth sonically, sometimes because they need it or sometimes they don't. And then there are other songs I think where really you just want to like play them as directly as you can. Obviously that's something we've done since day one. And this is just, I think, a song because of the message and because of the melody and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't really require that much. And actually, if you start throwing stuff on, you start throwing like melodic guitar parts on and stuff, I think it would like muddy it slightly. And I think I think it might be just over 2 minutes, which is, I think, on every Vaccines record there's like a 2-minute song, which is like I like keeping up that tradition. Yeah,
it's important stuff. But you mentioned early on about an existential crisis.
Yes.
That is one of the themes on the album, and this does include the line, "I just don't know who I am," which kind of, you know, taps directly into that idea. Yeah,
and I think that, like, you know, I'm 36 now, and I remember when I was, one of the first like songs I wrote when I was like 16 was like a really bad song, and it's like one of the lyrics was like, "I'm waiting for my life to begin," and I sometimes think back to that now and think like, well, I kind of feel the same, even though we've been like lucky enough to experience so much, like so much more, and achieve so much musically and creatively, like so much more than I ever would have imagined when I was like 16, but still feel like I'm trying to find my place in the world. And I think a lot of us feel like that, right? Maybe not
totally.
everybody.
No,
you
always think, oh, when I'm this, It will all be sorted, and it never is.
I remember when I first moved to London, and I'd go to all like the indie nights and stuff, and I'd see like a singer in a band. You know, I'd be like 18, 19, and across the bar I'd see like a singer in a band, someone who'd had like a, you know, like a piece in NME, or you know, even bigger artists as well. You know, kind of across the room, like talking to their friends and stuff. And I'd always just think like, God, if I could just achieve like 10% of what they've achieved, then everything will just be fine. I'll be okay. I'm going to be happy. And then, of course, like fun and happiness should not be confused as the same things. Not to say I'm not happy, but it doesn't, it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, oh,
like,
totally. No, that's
yeah.
really interesting. It's really interesting to hear that you had that experience, that in a way you're still having that experience. Maybe it's a different kind of star.
Yeah, maybe it's like Chris Martin now, or something like that.
But it's interesting to know the grass is always greener. We always think, well, if this happens, or if I put this in place, then everything will fall into place and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
No, and so that's going on in Primitive Man, that kind of questioning as well.
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting because you had a lot of musical experience before you ever moved to London. Now, I remember meeting somebody a few years ago who grew up in the same town as you did, and was telling me about how you were in these punk bands from a really young age, and this is on the South Coast.
Yes.
And you were really going for it, and every band was really vital and really exciting, and a lot more punky than anything else you came out with subsequently, but really in your face, loud, you know, hardcore punk.
Yeah, it really was. I was in like a power violence band, and I was like 13 or 14, and we were playing like these DIY, you know, like punk shows above this pub called the King Alfred in Southampton. Like pretty legit, like playing with like pretty legit like hardcore punk bands and stuff, and was going on like marches with like the Hunt Saboteurs and all this kind of stuff. It was like really, but it was just, you know, I guess I like music. I connected with music and like found community within music, and actually those phases were all quite short-lived, but every phase I went from one phase to the next and always managed to find sort of community and connection and all that kind of stuff, and also like just playing music as well just provided me with this outlet that I couldn't really like find anywhere else in life. So it was always like very driven to, you know, like, I guess like live a life where I could do that, as much of that as possible, I suppose. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting, that motivation from such an early age, and also, you know, the eyes on the prize, as it were, you know, that you had a goal that, right, how can I facilitate this? How can I make this happen? And you've been pursuing that ever since.
I found like, I had a band when I was like 11 or 12, and I like went on like a really, like nobody knows the name or anything like that, but I like Googled it the other day because I'd remembered that, one of my like bandmates or classmates had made us like a little website, and then on some like internet archive I found the website, and we were honestly like 12, and we interviewed ourselves, and like the drummer who'd like made the website was like, oh, you know, like he was like, oh, it's a good job Justin's in the band because he's like really driven and he makes us rehearse every week, and he and you know, like he makes us like learn all these songs and he makes us do this, and I don't have any memory of being that kind of energy, but it's like funny that that's how he saw me, like this annoying, like we've got to do this, we've got to do that, even because I sometimes worry I'm a bit like that in the vaccines, but I didn't realize I was like that when I was like 12.
That's just who you are. Excellent. I love that idea. And I think a lot of people who end up doing something creatively for their lives, you know, are like that, whether they realize it or not, because you have to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to be, because I think, you know, I think so much of, you know, if you're like lucky enough to come here and like talk to you about the music you've made, I mean, a lot of it is like luck, you know. Like I think that you can work as hard as you want at it and be as good as, you know, you can possibly be at it, but then so much of it's like timing, luck and all that kind of stuff. But I do think the working hard at it helps, like gives you like a much better chance of it coming together, doesn't it? Yeah, that combination. Yeah,
hard work and luck.
Yeah,
hopefully we'll see the right result.
Exactly.
Sunkissed is the next song, and are you getting romantic on Sunkissed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a slightly different, you know, I guess the record's like pretty cohesive sounding, and this is maybe like the one outlier, if you can call it that. It's like slightly more. I guess we were going for like, you know, like Brass in My Pocket Pretenders, like that kind of vibe, like a bit more like breezy, kind of I guess 80s sort of poppy kind of thing, and I guess it's romantic, yeah, but a bit nostalgic as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. We're going to hear it now. This is The Vaccines with Sunkissed on X-Posure Radio X. You're listening to X-Posure on Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, and that is another from The Vaccines. It's Another Nightmare, taken from the new album Pickup Full of Pink Carnations, which has just come out, and Justin is here talking us through it track by track. And Another Nightmare seems really heartfelt and emotional, and I wondered if it was about somebody in particular.
I mean, they're all about somebody.
Yeah.
Including, I guess, me, and then people I care about. Yeah, so it definitely is, and it's I guess a counterpart to. I mean, given that the album is this kind of one of dreams and loss of dreams and expectation and reality and all that kind of stuff, I think it was like pertinent to have a song called Another Nightmare on there as well. I don't know, just to balance it out. Yeah. But no, I think that everything. I try and be as truthful as I can in my lyrics. I try to say things in song that I don't have the guts to say in conversation, because I think the more personal you can be and the more truthful I think when people talk about good and bad music, that's obviously very subjective, but I do always really just think is how authentic it is. How much do the people who are singing it mean what they're saying, and they don't even have to mean what they're saying from an emotional standpoint. They could just mean it so much that it makes them want to dance, or it makes them want, do you know what I mean? And so I try to be as authentic as I possibly can be in my lyrics, in the hope that someone hears something in that and then connects with that. And then I think it's better to be interpersonal than universal or something.
Yeah. And have you found, if you are direct in the songs and less direct in everyday conversation, has that come back to bite you?
Yeah, it gets me into trouble, actually. Right. Yeah. It's got me into trouble a few times in the last couple of years, actually. Yeah.
Because
I'm not out of the woods yet either, so I have to be careful. I know you guys sort of syndicate this across your socials, so I have to probably be careful what I say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that it's interesting with Another Nightmare, because I don't want to wait for you to get better. Is that the right lyric that I've heard? I mean, that's
I don't want to wait a year to feel better.
I always mishear things and come up with something completely different.
But that's valid too.
Yeah. But I think yours has an impatience that has a different twist on it.
Yeah,
it's a little bit kinder than I don't want to wait.
Well, that's the other thing. I do think it's important not to be unkind in songs. I think that's if ever it's really obvious who I'm talking about, I'm either trying to celebrate them or, hold myself to account, I would say. I don't think it's fair to hold other people to account in song.
Yeah, that's not quite how you are working in what you're saying about sometimes putting more truth into the song.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's nice the way sonically with Another Nightmare, how in a way, it's quite brittle sounding. It's noisier. It's more distorted than some of the other tracks, which matches part of the theme, but also the title.
Exactly. I do. It's funny. A few people have said to me that you can sort of hear that the record was written and recorded in California, and I always like that. I like that you can hear. Didn't they used to say metal music was because of the steelworks in Sheffield or something like that? And there's obviously this West Coast, breezy West Coast sound that people talk about, and heartland rock and all this kind of stuff. And I do like the idea that you can hear where something was made, the fact that it's kind of soaking up the energy and the atmosphere, like a photograph or something. And the same, with if you're singing about a state, a nightmare or a dream, I think, in some way to kind of match that sonically, I think it's always a good thing. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you think this sounds like a Californian album then?
I do actually, yeah. I was putting words in other people's mouths there, but no, I do. Yeah, I think it sounds quite kind of breezy. Yeah. I mean, West Coast, I think of music you listen to in the car, I guess, right?
Yeah.
With the windows down or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it has, and all your records have a lot of momentum to them. They're great to drive to. They're great to move forward to, be it running, walking. If you're soundtracked by the Vaccines, you're going to get there.
I think this might have more momentum on it than anything since the first record, maybe as well. I think it's but it doesn't feel in a rush either, if that makes sense. It feels like it's quick, but it's taking its time, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. Although the next song is possibly the quickest on the album, is it?
Wait, what is the next song?
The next song is Love to Walk Away.
Oh yeah, I guess that is the quickest.
And that is probably like the most upbeat.
Yes.
On the record. What's this one about?
Much the same as the previous one.
Right.
No, I think that that's not entirely true. I mean, it was, it was the first song actually written for the record, and at that point, I think it had been a year since Back in Love City had, come out, and so it was like 3 years since we'd recorded back, because we recorded Back in Love City in like 2019, and then just like kept pushing it back to the pandemic. So we were like raring to go, like feeling really, had all these lyrics and had all these themes and stuff, but wasn't really sure how to dress it up, and then wrote Love to Walk Away. And it sort of came out sounding, quite sort of like direct and I guess, are you allowed? I don't even know if you're allowed to say indie rock anymore, but it sounded like just like an indie rock song or something. And I don't know, I just felt really inspired and excited by it. And kind of what I quite often do when I really like a song I've written is I then just listen to that for like the next 2 weeks. And every time I'm going on a run, every time I'm like going to meet someone, even if I get to the pub, I'll like stand outside for 5 minutes and like listen to it one more time, and that's kind of like the feeling I'm chasing. Like, do I love it? Like in this moment, like before anyone else, let alone like people reviewing the record, like before I even like share it with the band, like is this getting me really excited? And I had that feeling with this song. And so the idea of kind of chasing down an album's worth of songs that sounded like that, I think became the like MO basically.
Yeah, I love that idea. And what state would it be when you're listening to it on repeat like that?
I mean, probably like some like rough MIDI drums, or maybe some like really rough human, but I guess like a very rough version of what you end up hearing. Probably not much like lead guitar, but yeah, kind of something that's like 60%. Yeah. And I'll go through phases of writing like most of the parts, and then other times I'll like leave the songs pretty empty, and then everybody can kind of bring what they bring to the band, to the songs, I guess. Yeah.
Excellent. Will we ever hear those? Do you think those kind of demos?
We're being made to kind of release them all the time, because you need them for like Japanese deluxe versions, or like, I don't know, digital only. I don't know. Yeah, probably. In fact, come to think of it, that the demo of Love to Walk Away may well be like out in the world as of this interview airing.
Amazing. Excellent. Well, I think people like to compare and contrast. But I do like that idea that you're living with it for a few weeks, getting and exciting yourself with it.
Totally. And I do that with the record as well. Like when we finish a record, and you like master a record, there's this kind of like brief like love affair you're able to have with it, between finishing it and anybody else hearing it, and other people telling you it's not pretty enough, or it's not interesting enough, or it's not clever enough, all this kind of stuff. And then obviously once that starts happening, you like start falling out of love with it, and then you start thinking about the next record, because you're like, oh no, like maybe they were, people get in your head about it. So that period of time where nobody can say anything to you about it, I think is like a really special. And maybe, I don't know, you speak to a lot more musicians than I do. Maybe there are people that don't like listening to their own music even at that point, but for me, that's like a really special, like treasured, like period of time, basically.
Yeah, that's great. And in a way, you're building up your defenses as well. You're making sure that you're happy with it, and if you're happy with it, then it doesn't matter what.
Totally, and I think this also, like this far in as well. Like I think you have to trust yourself, because if you start like playing to the crowd, as it were, you're just going to go insane. Yeah.
Stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Follow the vision.
Yeah.
And it always feels that there is a vision with the vaccines.
I hope so.
Once the vaccines arrived, after your various different music-making endeavours, it seemed like this was the vehicle. This was the one.
I hope so, yeah. And it's, it remains the most important thing in my life. That sounds sad, I don't know. But, and I want us to be brilliant, and I want us to like have fun as we're attempting to be brilliant. And I think most of the time we are. So having fun, that is. So I don't know, yeah.
Excellent. This is the Vaccines then, with Love to Walk Away on Radio X. It is the Vaccines with The Dreamer. It is the penultimate song on the brand new album, Pickup Full of Pink Carnations, which is out now. It's just come out today. Justin from the band has been talking us through it track by track. I'm John Kennedy, and The Dreamer is the song where the phrase Pickup Full of Pink Carnations comes from.
It is.
But I think it also links to another song, does it?
It does. So it's a misremembered lyric from Don McLean's American Pie, which I think he sings like I was a lonely teenage bronco buck with a pink carnation and a pickup truck, I think, right?
Right.
And like this phrase came to me when I was writing The Dreamer, and I wasn't really sure where it come from. I Googled it just to make sure I hadn't plagiarized it, and it took me and I put it in the song. It took me ages to figure out where it came from, and then I remembered, and I thought it was kind of, I think there was something in that, because there's obviously a song about, dreaming and the lost dreams and all that sort of thing. And that song, I guess I'd always interpreted as a song about, the death of innocence and, the day the music died, as it were, and maybe even the death of the American dream loosely, whatever that may be, or whatever that may mean. And so I think a phrase that originally hadn't meant that much ended up meaning kind of everything. And the fact that it ended up in a song called The Dreamer, felt like it was meant to be, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then it became the album title.
Yes. And actually, to be honest with you, as soon as I came up with the phrase, I was like, that's the album title. Yeah.
That's it. And does that happen often?
No. It happened with Back in Love City. It happened with What Did You Expect? And then the others, I think, kind of took a bit of time, yeah.
And would this be during the making of the album, or is this in advance or after?
No, this was during the making. So this, like as I was writing The Dreamer, which I guess I can't remember when. No memory of writing it now. Well, I can remember writing it, I just can't remember when. But yeah, no. So it's probably like halfway through, And then I'll always like email everyone being like, I was thinking about this for an album title, and everyone was like, that's good, which doesn't always happen. So.
Oh right, okay. So they immediately responded positively.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it, in a way, it conjures up quite a kind of image in your mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, like someone in our team the other day, was like, look, you can look at what AI thinks Pickup Full of Pink Carnations is. I think the fact that like, it is quite, maybe evocative isn't the right word, but yeah, you can do a lot with it, I guess.
Yeah.
In your mind.
Yeah. And is there a reference to Edgar Allan Poe in The Dreamer?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
And when because you often bring things in like that.
Yeah.
And are they born out of you happen to be reading Edgar Allan Poe at that point, or are they brought in because of what they stand for, or
a bit of everything. Actually, funnily enough, the Edgar Allan Poe line was a line from a song that I put on SoundCloud in lockdown, and I just reused it. Basically, it was a song I just wrote and recorded in 20 minutes, and then I can't remember what the other lyrics are in the song now with that, but I think there is another reference to Edgar Allan Poe later on in the song as well. So I think that maybe I built on that. But I love kind of pop culture references in songs. I think they're always fun and funny, and I think they ground them somehow or something,
Yeah. You've done it all the time.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy it. It's great. But I always think, how significant is that reference?
Some more than others, I think. But yeah.
Excellent. So the album's out now. You're doing a series of in-stores. You've got a big tour in February. Busy year ahead for the Vaccines. Is this the place you like to be? Because it seems to me that part of being the Vaccines is all about playing and getting out there.
I think it is, and I think that I really stand by us as a live band. I think our shows are so fun and powerful as well, and I think we're only getting better. And for me, I love writing music. I love being in the studio, but then kind of the time between finish, kind of promoting, it feels like going on tour is almost like the reward for promoting a record or something like that. And it's I always get told off by the others because I call it holiday by mistake, because it's obviously not a holiday, but I just love being, you can press pause on real life and just exist in this bubble and go and perform every night. And like the tours sold really well, and like to be like 13 years in, and to like still have that many people that want to come and hear, even if it is like stuff from, I don't know, album 1 or album 4, or I don't know, it doesn't really bother me. Like, I'm just so happy that we get to like, that we have this like audience in this community, and we get to share what we do with them. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and it grows. I mean, it seems to me from going to the shows, I see different people each time. So you leave it a few years and go back and watch you play, and it's like, a whole load of people who, have just discovered you.
Totally, and that's like something I'm always like, every time we go out on the road and I look at like the front row, and it's like a new front row of like young kids, I'm always like, I like do a little dance inside. I'm like so happy that there's this kind of like, there's this kind of, I guess, I don't know what the term is, like a travelator, I guess, like, with people as they get older, they move further to the back of the room, whatever, but these new people keep discovering us and coming to watch the shows and stuff. And that's like, I would hate for us, I'm not ready to kind of walk out on stage and see guys in their 40s on the front row yet. We're not there, I don't think.
Yeah, as great as those people are.
As great as those people are, I'd just rather they stood 6 feet back from the front row.
And I think people love the energy that the band brings.
Yeah.
I think that's the key ingredient, isn't it? And also that the songs are instant. You react. I always feel when I get a new Vaccine song to play on the show, it's like always an instant hit. Because that's the way you write them. That's the way you think about them.
Yeah, I think we are very direct, and I think that some music you want to challenge you, and other music you want to comfort you. And I never really loved music that challenges me. I've always loved music that comforts me. So I think that's like why I'm drawn to writing, more direct songs with more direct messages. Yeah.
Anonymous in Los Feliz is the closing track to the
Yes.
album. What can you tell us about this? I mean, the title alone could be a film title.
Yeah. Do you know, I was in my friend's studio the other day, and he had his they had their kind of like whiteboard, like ticking off songs that they were like working on for their record, and they had a song on the board called Anonymous in New York, and I was like, we've got a song called Anonymous in Los Feliz on our record. Do you know, I'm going to be really honest with you, and so I haven't listened to this song for like a month now. I can't really even remember. I can't really get in the headspace, but I suppose it's it's probably, again, a bit like feeling, just trying to kind of bottle up that feeling of being like lost in the world a bit and feeling a little invisible sometimes. And I think that's, an inevitable feeling in any big city, particularly like a new city and somewhere as vast as LA. I mean, something that I never really got used to living in LA is that like walking down the street, you kind of feel like you're in a fish tank because nobody's walking around, everybody's in their cars, and you feel like a bit of a weirdo walking down the sidewalk, and that always used to make me feel, I guess, just like edgy or something. Yeah.
Have you ever switched and just used a car?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a car out there, but I haven't got to the point yet where I'm like driving it to get coffee, which I think is what eventually happens to everyone. Even if it's like a kilometer, I want to like walk and get my morning coffee. Yeah. Well, I completely understand.
Yeah. But some people might not.
No. Yeah. Well, they've got like and there's drive-throughs as well, so you don't even need to. But yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting when that turning point comes and you change.
I know
that way of behaving.
I know.
Yeah. Will it happen, do you think? I mean, how much time do you spend in LA then?
Well, I've been there the last couple of years, but we're on tour now for the rest of the year. And so I've done like the scary thing, which I always seem to end up doing, of just like packing like 3 suitcases and not like planning on, because I don't think we really stopped for longer than like 2 or 3 days until early summer really. So I think I'm just living on the bus now.
Yeah. the on holiday. You're on holiday.
Exactly, I'm on holiday.
So good to see you, Justin. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And this is the last tonight from the Vaccines. This is Anonymous in Los Feliz on X-Posure, Radio X.
Radio X.